Welcome, everyone, to Lions Do Not Bow. My name is Nathaniel Pawlowski. I'm a law student, and together with my dad, Pastor Artur Pawlowski, we do this show where we talk about politics and history and the Bible and theology and a whole bunch of other things that are going on, and one of which is what's going on with current events, culture, and today we're going to be talking about a very important topic, something that has become very prevalent in Canada specifically, and the rest of the world could learn a few things from what's going on in Canada, and that is medical assistance in dying, euthanasia. So we're going to tackle that topic this week, just like we talked about abortion last week. We're going to talk about this from a biblical perspective, how it came about, the history of this topic, and how it became such a part of our society in Canada. So we'll get right into it, and I'll introduce my dad, Pastor Artur Pawlowski, and we'll jump into it.
Good to see you, Nathaniel. I mean, the topic is in one hand fascinating, in another is so sad. Just like the topic that we covered last week, abortion, the murder of the innocent children in the name of convenience, and MAID or assisted suicide that we are witnessing right now in Canada is the same thing. It's in the name of convenience. Instead of healing people, the government has decided to slaughter them. So I have few thoughts that I want to bring first. And people need to understand what is happening here. Canada has become the leading force in murdering their own citizens. Murder instead of healing, eliminating instead of supporting. When that happens in any society, you know that that society is being led by Satan himself. Why am I saying this? Because God, God of the Bible, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is God of life. Satan is an idol, a creature of death. So when a society is leaning towards death, you know that that society is being led by Satan himself. We talked about this, and quite often when I preach, Nathaniel, I always tell the people that there's something that I call progression of sin. The progression of sin leads to a culture of death. Every single time, every civilization, every culture, every society, historically speaking, that has embraced sin as a norm always, Nathaniel, leads to death. And it started in this country, in our beloved Canada, with murder of the innocent children, again, in the name of convenience. Now, Canada murders those that they view, are you ready? They view as a burden, useless eaters. And I want you to understand that we've heard those terms, those slogans before in history. People that are not productive, the homeless people. As you know, we feed a lots of people on the streets of Calgary. We're doing this 3 times a week. And in the past few years, we have observed a slaughter, a literal slaughter of the homeless people. They're being systematically eliminated from the streets of our cities in the province of Alberta. That's the way that the government has decided to clean the problem. The disabled people, the depressed, the elderly. And here is the thing that people must understand, because you might say, well, this is not affecting me. I'm not suicidal. I don't want to, kill myself. I don't want to die. So why should I care? And here is the thing: you should care, because if it's not stopped, if whatever we are witnessing right now in Canada is not stopped, it will lead into eliminating political opponents, whistleblowers, those that demand accountability. It is not, again, this is not my conspiracy theory, it's history. Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia, North Korea, China, Sharia law infested nations that we see today operate in a similar, in such a manner.
Yeah.
It moves every single time from let's murder those that we do not need, in quote, into let's murder those that we do not like. Let me read this again. It moves every single time when it's not tackled, when it's not addressed. It moves from let's murder those that we do not need in our society, according, of course, to those that do the slaughtering, into let's murder those that we do not like. And here is the thing. In Canada alone, in just past few years, over 100,000 white Canadians were slaughtered, were murdered by the system. Just in the past few years, 100,000 most white Canadians were destroyed. And the question that everyone must ask themselves is why? Why Canadian regime is murdering its own citizens? And the
Yeah.
answer, Nathaniel, is always the same. For the same reason the Nazis did it, the Soviet did it, and other tyrannical governments are still doing around the world to replace them with somebody else, the purer race, if you will, if we are to connect this to the Nazi Germany, and for monetary benefit. According to the Canadian government, it is easier to murder their own citizens than to provide healthcare, to heal them, to support them, to help them in their time of need. Canadians are systematically are murdering they're being systematically murdered and are being replaced by those that hate freedom, those that hate God and democracy. And this is the globalistic, the globalist agenda. And they are not even hiding it. They are openly telling you and me that what they want to eliminate actually billions of people that they hate, they do not like. So in conclusion, until we will, I'll give you the floor and we'll go into some of the historical, things that we have observed in the past. But people, especially people that are living today, we have those slogans, lest we forget, we're a better society. And the people would like to believe that they are better than the Nazis, communists, and the tyrants from the past. The truth is that without God, people are worse than animals. And that's my conclusion after over 30 years working with people. I have concluded that people are worse. They behave a lot worse than animals. And Canadians turn themselves into vicious, wicked, and without heart, without soul animals. Today's
Yeah.
society in Canada is not much better than the one that we observed in the 30s in Germany. The same pattern, that's how you know, the same hatred, the same ungodliness. And when you observe such a decline, you know the judgment is imminent. And that's what I have been receiving from God. And people need to understand unless we change our ways, repent, turn away from our wicked ways, the judgment is set and people are going to hurt. Hard times are coming for a society that has become so evil. Canadian society has become evil. All political ruling parties in Canada are from the pit of hell. Liberals, NDPers, conservatives, they are all the same. They will have a different, pitches, if you will, to win elections. But in the end of the day, they are wicked and evil, leading Canadian society into the pit of hell. And the sooner people realize this, the sooner the liberation will come. Again, from the biblical perspective, we have to understand if you're a Christian, if you're not a Christian, then I get it. Everything goes. You can act like an animal. I mean, there's no tomorrow, there's no hell, there's no heaven, there's no God, there's no Satan. You do as you please, the survival of the fittest. But we know, we Christians, we know that the Bible is true, God is there, and the judgment will come. And we must, as Christians, we must understand that God is God of life. The devil is a creature of death. And if you're supporting a political party, if you're supporting an organization, a society that is forwarding death, you are in fact working for Satan himself. The doctors that are slaughtering human beings, the nurses, they're assisting them in this murder, in the systematic elimination of white Canadians, slaughter of the innocent children, like we talked last week. And of course, the government in the province of Alberta that is giving free drugs during the night hours to the homeless people to destroy them, to finish them off sooner. And like I said, at the beginning, that's the way of cleaning the streets. That's the way of eliminating the homelessness crisis that we have in Canada by simply murdering them. You must understand that one day you will face the judge of judges, the giver of life, and hell awaits you for eternity. And before we go on, I just want to say something about the topic that is very sensitive. There are people, I've met those people, some of those people that have decided to destroy themselves, to commit suicide. And we're not here to judge or to tell everybody else what is happening to them or what's going to happen to them. We just do not know. We leave that in the hands of God. There are all kinds of circumstances, mental illness. People just do crazy things because they're overwhelmed or they're mentally challenged. Whatever the issue is, we leave that in the hands of God. But I want you to know, as a believer, as a Christian, that God is God of life. And no man, including yourself, no man has a right to take that life away. If God wants you out, for whatever reason, He is going to take you out. You're going to die. And in the end of the day, we're all going to die sooner or later. So I would encourage you, if you claim that you are a Christian, I would encourage you to always stand on a side of life, never on a side of death. If you see people that are struggling, they're contemplating something like MAID, assisted suicide, or other means, encourage them to have hope and to trust in the Lord. Because we go through seasons, we go through attacks, and some attacks are overwhelming and people snap and break, and some say, I'm throwing a towel, I can't go on anymore, I don't want to go on anymore. And I understand, as a pastor, I understand the feelings, I understand the pressure, but I want to encourage you that today you may feel like you want to throw a towel, but then the next day comes and the sun shines, and then you say, oh, what a stupid thoughts I had yesterday to end my life. While life is worth living, it's a gift. And again, it's a gift not from the government, not from the doctors, not from the nurses. It's a gift from God, and only God should have the right to take that gift away. So, those were the thoughts that I had on my heart to tell you, and then I'll give Nathaniel the floor, and later on we will go through a little bit about what is happening with Made in Canada, and also I want to tie this to the culture that we have seen in the Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, because the patterns are always identical. They always unfold the same way, and when you know history, when you know what happened before, the Bible says, known are to us the devices of the enemy. In other words, we know his tricks, we know his tactics, and also what was will be again. Nothing is new under the sun. When you know the facts, when you know history, when you know the schemes of the enemy, you will be able to properly protect yourselves from the attacks. And that's what I love to teach about. I love to bring history because I want the people to understand that we've seen this before. So you shouldn't be shocked. You're dealing with humans that are evil. They have chosen to be evil, and we've seen this before. So this is what they're doing, but this is their remedy. History is teaching us not only about what people are capable of doing to other human beings, but also what is their remedy, how we can fix this problem. That's why I love history. That's why I love teaching history. Because yeah, this is evil, but this is how you tackle that evil. So Nathaniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so you said a few things I want to address, but first, what is MAID, right? MAID is medical assistance in dying. It's a According to Canada.ca, it's a legal, regulated, and voluntary process allowing the terminally ill, competent adults to request a prescription for life-ending medication from a physician, which they administer themselves. Of course, they call this dying with dignity. Now, you said something that I find very fascinating. You said the term culture of death. So before I, before I talk about that, because culture of death is very important, it's actually integral. You said that what this would potentially lead to is like dissidents and people that the government would want to eliminate doing this process. But besides that risk, there's a, I believe, even greater risk to society at large. Just if you, right, we talk about the general welfare, we talk about society, everyone cares about that, right? The good of everyone. That's something I can appeal to, that will, pull on the heartstrings of everyone cares about society, everyone cares about the general welfare. Well, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this a little bit later, what happens to a society when it adopts a culture of death. And I actually found out in one of my classes that we have more old people alive today than ever before. We have a record breaking number of old people living compared to young people. People are not being born. We have less young people, we have less children being born, and more old people. And this is just like, if you think about this, just zoom out a little bit, how crazy this is. We are eliminating children, babies in the womb, so they're not being born, right? One third of my generation is missing because of abortion. We talked about that last week. If you want to go watch our entire episode on abortion, you can go back and watch that. We are eliminating an entire generation in the womb, and then there's more old people, and now we're eliminating them. This is crazy. We are shortening, us stupid people are shortening the lifespan of already a very tiny amount of time that we have on this earth, and we are shortening that even. So we don't even know what the repercussions of having such an old population is, because this is just unprecedented in all of human history. That just doesn't happen. You usually have more young people, you have children being born, you have people with large families. And now in Canada and the United States, you don't have children being born. You have more old people in society. And now we're going to eliminate them as well, I guess. Like you said before, over 100,000 people have been killed. I mean, they have been part of this process. I find this very interesting. They the terminology that they use is just, it's so fascinating, because you try to understand, why would the government do this? And here we have statistics that talk about MAID and how it's becoming a leading cause of death in Canada. One of the leading causes of death right now is a government program where you go in and the doctor kills you. This is just, this is insanity. And the terminology that they use, that this is dying with dignity, that it's all, they package it in such a nice way. But I want to talk about culture of death, because we don't have too much time today. We're not going to be as expansive as we were on the topic of abortion. We want to just quickly address this so that people can watch this and actually understand and be able to talk about this, because we need awareness about this. We need to push back against what's going on in Canada, because this has catastrophic consequences. Culture of death was a term coined by Pope John Paul II, And he was referring to a modern, secularized society that devalues human life through practices like abortion, euthanasia, and bioethical, economic, or political disregard for the vulnerable. It is characterized by a loss of the sense of God. Of course, we see that in society right now. We are all a society of secular humanists, and the treating of human life as mere matter to be manipulated. We can play God. Of course, that is the sentiment that science and government is pushing on people, that we can play God. But we know from history that when a society adopts a culture of death, it basically destroys the society gradually over time because civic virtue is completely eroded. Children are no longer being born, and society just implodes upon itself. This is what happens when you have a society that despises life and values death more, and it's catastrophic, and it leads to eugenics. And we have seen eugenics, of course, with the Nazi Party in Germany, but we've seen it more recently in countries like Iceland. So Iceland had a eugenics program where essentially they murdered all of the Down syndrome babies. If they knew that a baby was going to be born with Down syndrome, they murdered it in the womb. And Iceland has no more of a population with anyone with Down syndrome, but they murdered people to get that result. That is eugenics. And not only is it wrong by human standards, it's wrong biblically. So I'm going to read a few verses because that's how we started the abortion episode, and I think that's always what you go back to. You go back to what God has to say about something, and then we can discuss things from a philosophical or historical perspective. In Deuteronomy 32:39 says, I put to death and I bring to life. That is in God's hands and God's hands only. And before I continue with the Bible verses, we all believe this because, like, think about this. I'll throw this question out to my dad a little bit rhetorically, but so as a father, if he ever saw us siblings punishing each other, he was not happy about that. Like he when us siblings would start, spanking each other, or we would put each other in timeouts, or we would ground each other. That's not what a parent wants, unless that authority was given by the parent. The siblings don't have the authority, right? If my younger brother started to, try to ground me, no, he doesn't have that authority. The parent has that authority, and that so that's ingrained in us that certain people, certain things have jurisdiction and certain things do not. So the parent has authority over me to ground me, to put me in timeout, to discipline me. Um, but us amongst each other, we don't really have that. So in the same way, when God gives us certain authority, we don't have the authority to go do certain things that God has the authority to do as the father of us all. He created us, he gave us life, therefore he has ultimate authority. And we just I say that to illustrate that we all have this law of nature written into us, and we just don't really realize it because it's just part of our reality. And and we have to understand that God has the authority. Yes, there are examples in the Bible where God took life. He took a lot of life because he's the giver of life. He's the creator. He can do whatever he wants. He creates laws. He has the ultimate moral authority over us. In the same way, a parent has moral authority over the children. The children don't have moral authority over the parents. In 1 Samuel 2:6, the Lord brings death and makes alive. Job 1:21, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Genesis 1:26, humans are made in the image of God. Genesis 9:6, whoever sheds human blood, for in the image of God, God made mankind. It's a paraphrase. Exodus 20:13, you shall not murder. Matthew 5:21, Jesus takes that even further. That murder is that even if you have hatred in your heart, you're committing murder. Um, a really powerful verse is in Second Corinthians. First Corinthians 6:19, do you not know your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit? Therefore, honor God with your bodies. Our body is not our own. The Bible continuously tells us that we are God's. God is the only person who has jurisdiction over us. And therefore, you can't just take your own life. And again, it's a very sensitive topic that we're not going to get into that because I don't know. The Bible doesn't actually say the word suicide anywhere in the Bible, much like the Bible doesn't say the word abortion. But you can get enough from the Bible to understand very clearly, without a doubt, that abortion is wrong. And we can mostly, again, I don't know. I don't know if there's exceptions or excuses or justifications, but we can glean from the Bible, from what it says, that suicide is wrong, that our bodies are not our own, that we do not have the authority to take our own life. If you think about it from again, zoom out about what the act of suicide is, how selfish of an act it is. I believe it's the most selfish thing, the most self-centered thing you could do on this planet. You were given a gift of life, and you've decided that you're no longer going to have faith in God because whatever circumstance that you have placed on earth that is so heavy over you, you are placing that circumstance higher than God. You've placed your life, your circumstances, your hardships higher than God. So therefore your faith, you've diminished. It is a very selfish, unfaithful action. And again, I'm not talking about where a person's being tortured half to death and they take their, I'm sure there's circumstances. God is the ultimate just God, and I place that in his hand. I'm not the judge. But we can glean from what the Bible says that in most circumstances, this would be wrong. And if you're an old person who is struggling with things, you still don't have the right to take your own life. So to say to society, we don't value you, you are not, like, you don't get to, if a middle-aged person, 35-year-old goes to the doctor and say, hey, doc, can you kill me? Right now, as the law stands, you cannot do that. The doctor will have no ability to just do that. So what you're doing, what society in Canada has done, what the government has done, is they've placed old people below lower value than a middle-aged 35-year-old man or woman. Because that person can't go into a doctor and say, hey, doc, can you kill me? But an old person can. So where's the value in that old person? Whereas in ancient societies, we would value old people. The Bible says that gray hair is a testament to wisdom, and that we are, throughout the entire Bible, we are to value old people, respect the older generation, that they have wisdom and value to give to the family, to society. I mean, there's a reason that you can't be below a certain age and run for certain offices. Because when you're older, you have certain wisdom, certain knowledge, certain life experience. And instead of valuing that, we have devalued it, placed them below as second-class citizens that can be slaughtered like cattle. In the same way, this is on par with abortion, in the sense that we are devaluing people. They are no longer valuable simply for being humans and awarded certain protections. Because a child can't go, as of right now, and hopefully the law does not change, but a child can't go to a doctor and say, hey, doc, can you kill me? But a baby in the womb can be killed by its own mother. So what we're doing, and I really like this quote, someone said that if abortion is healthcare, then slavery was job creation. So I'm going to change that quote. I'm going to say, if euthanasia is healthcare, then slavery was job creation. You don't get to just slap the word healthcare onto everything and say it's healthcare just because you labeled it that. You are ending a human life unjustifiably. This isn't a state of war. This isn't a self-defense claim. You are ending an innocent human person life, a vulnerable person who's struggling, who is in pain, who's suffering. And at the end of the day, that person has no right to go in and to demand that their life be taken. The Bible's clear on this topic. And to have a society that elevates this position that ending human life is somehow dignity is very dangerous for society. We've seen things like this, and maybe we can save this for another episode and talk about different historical empires and structures of government that eroded and decayed. The Roman Empire is a fascinating topic. What led to the collapse of the Roman Empire? One of them was eroding civic virtue. How did that happen? And we can talk about that next time, and we can get into the history of it. But I'll give it back to you, Dad, to tell people how this relates to the Nazi regime, what happened, eugenics, and how dangerous this is.
Yeah, first of all, I have to correct you because you're saying that if you're 35, you go to a doctor and then he has no legal right to end your life. Well, that's changed. In Canada, if you're 18 and up, you can ask for assisted suicide and you will be exterminated like cockroach in the name of the healthcare system. So,
Has
uh,
there been any case of this? I haven't heard of any cases of a younger person yet, but
no, no,
I've
I've heard that young people are being killed, murdered. I don't like to say killed. They are being murdered by the doctors and the nurses in a Canadian healthcare system. There
hmm.
is again about 100,000 humans that were lost, were slaughtered like cattle in Canada. So I want to try to share a screen, see if that will work. Let me know if the audio will be cut off or something like this happens. So let's try it. And here it is. So you can still hear me.
Yep.
Yeah, assisted dying now accounts for 1 in 20 Canada deaths. Like, think about that. Just think about this for a second. You've got 1 in 20 deaths in Canada is by the government murdering their own people. The country's fifth annual report since euthanasia was legalized in 2016 showed around 15,300 people underwent assisted dying. This is just a few years ago, is escalating. Remember, I told you at the very beginning that sin increases, it never decreases, it's always more, never less if it comes to sin. So this is now, this is in a phase of multiplication. So first was few thousand, then over 10,000, then 16,000, and now is a lot more, about 100,000 people were
And I just
already.
want to I just want to add to what you said earlier. You're actually 100% correct. In early 2026, a 26-year-old man in British Columbia did get assisted suicide by MAID.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah,
correct.
young
They're
young
changing the
person,
rules.
a young person got slaughtered instead of Canadian healthcare system helping that person, working with that person, injecting hope into that man's life. They injected a lethal dose.
I wonder when the rules will change where a child will be able to ask a doctor to end their life
It's already in
without
the making. It's
and
already in the
without
making.
and I wouldn't be surprised if that was without parental consent soon.
Yes, it's already in the making. It has been introduced that Canadian so-called healthcare system wants to start slaughtering children and without the parental approval. So the parents will have no say. If a kid wants to die, the parents will be excluded from the conversation and the kid will be murdered. I mean, what is, Nathaniel, the difference between, according to them, those monsters, but because that's what they are monsters, they're beasts. What is the difference between slaughtering a baby or slaughtering a 10-year-old or 15 or 20 or 50 or an 80? I mean, to them, it's just statistics.
Yeah.
They are the modern day Nazis. Like I like to remind people that Canada has completely fallen. So this
And I mean, just to say, like, the hypocrisy of it from a legal standpoint, if I asked somebody, "Hey, help me take my life," and they did that, that person would be prosecuted. That person would effectively become a criminal. But because it's a government program, because our taxpayer dollars are going towards this, and because it's a government doctor, that makes it okay. So why are these arbitrary lines being drawn, like the abortion after 15 weeks, that's bad. They draw these weird lines as if it changes anything. Oh, 15 weeks, that's too much, but 6 weeks, no, that's
because
okay. What
Nathaniel,
about 14 and a half weeks? Oh,
be-
then it's okay, but 15 weeks, no, then it's a crime. Like these lines make no sense, and with MAID it makes zero sense. Why is it okay? Why is it okay for a doctor to end my life, but if somebody helped me, if a family member tried to help me, they would become a criminal? That is a crime. These lines make zero sense.
with Satan, nothing makes sense. You try to find a reason with a creature that is unreasonable. You have to understand that when you talk about those things, you have to use his glasses, and his glasses are glasses of hatred. Satan hates what God loves, and he loves people. He loves you. He created you for a purpose. Actually, the Bible goes as far as to say that you're a crown in God's creation. He adores you so much that he was
And
willing
what
to
is it
die
like
for you.
to those older people that are struggling and are really terminally ill, struggling, they are dying, they are suffering? The Bible actually talks about this. It says, first of all, persevere till the end. It says in 2 Corinthians 4:16, present affliction is temporary compared to the eternal glory. um, so many verses that talk about our body not being our own. 1 Corinthians 6:9, you are not your own. You were bought at a price. So again, in certain circumstances, I don't know. I'm not the judge. God will judge. But in many of these circumstances, you are you are effectively telling Jesus, the price that I was bought at is not good enough, because I'm going to take my life, even though you paid for me with your own blood, your own body, which we just as human beings can't even fathom how insane that is, that the creator of the universe came down in human form, took on sin, died, was separated from God for a time, and then, of course, was raised again. But to suffer, for the creator of the universe to come down, I don't think we can fully understand how incredible that is. And in a God that is ultimately good. A lot of people have a problem because, well, if all this evil is going on, how can good God exist? Well, one, he gave us free will. We get to choose, because if we didn't have free will, then we wouldn't be able to love him. We'd be robots. Without a choice, you can't love. You can't force someone to love you. They have to have free will. They have to have a choice to love. And God bought us with this price. He gave his only son, and for us to just reject it. I mean, if God is ultimately good, then he will turn all the evil to good. So even all this evil stuff, I mean, look at all the thousands of years of sin, and then Jesus came and it was all undone. Sin
Yeah,
was
but
destroyed. Death was destroyed. So an ultimately good God will turn all of this evil stuff into his good. So if you are suffering, if you are a person who's ill and going through this, even that will be turned for his good. But if you reject, you're effectively saying it's not good enough. And you're taking matters into your own hands instead of having faith in God. So it's a dangerous game to play, where you place yourself in the position of God. And we know from the Bible that God hates it when people do that.
yeah, yeah. No suffering. I wanted to add, but you already did it. Suffering can be a testimony, because on this side of eternity we go through seasons, and some of those seasons are a great joy and beautiful times, and there are seasons that are seasons of great suffering, and all kinds of bad things can happen your way. But when you persevere to the end, when you keep plowing, even if you feel I just want to throw a towel and end it, you will become a testimony to others that perhaps in the future will go through those things, and they will look at your gray hair and say, hey, Art, how did you endure this? I mean, this was insane, and yet you did it. That reminds me of a little story with Tobias Thiessen. Tobias Thiessen was the pastor that stood against the lockdowns and in Manitoba. And when I was arrested and thrown in prison, I shared my story with him when they came visit, and when I went to visit them. And I said, "Well, I was singing, I was praying, I was enduring, and all this craziness." When Tobias was arrested, he told me afterwards that's what kept him going. That he was reminded that if Artur Pawlowski could go through this hardship, and what did Art did? Well, he was singing, he was praying, he was preaching. He did the same thing, and that kept him going. So the horrible thing that happened to me in the end has become a testimony for somebody else that was going through a horrible moments in his life, and it was used for God's glory. So in the end of the day, even the suffering and the pain, if you persevere, if you keep plowing, if you don't quit, if you don't give up, will be used to save other lives. And ultimately that's what this life is all about, is being able to give life, to give hope to others. I want to share another screen. There's few things that I want to throw here, um, because I think it's important that it's not just we're talking about this, and I mean the whole world is watching right now what is happening in Canada, and it's so sad. This is government of Canada. I mean, again, the government should always be advocating for life. The government should protect life, especially the life of their citizens. It should encourage people, it should assist them, should help them in their time of needs. Why do we pay taxes? It's beyond me. If you have a government that is so hostile, so evil against you. But when I read
So,
this,
yeah, so we were, before you scroll down, scroll back up. There's that little I, and it says eligibility for MAID for persons suffering solely from a mental illness has been delayed until March 17, 2027. So in 1 year from now, the mentally ill will be able to participate in MAID. So if you're mentally ill, you can go and a doctor can kill you. That's that if that's not taking advantage of the vulnerable. And I was actually reading a very interesting statistic, which which actually says that medical assistance in dying is a cost saving mechanism
yes,
used by the government. So all these old people, like I was saying at the beginning, that there's more old people. Well, what does that mean for Canada? When there's more old people, that means they're kind of eating up more tax dollars,
yes,
right? They participate more in the programs of social welfare. So they're well, to use your words, they're useless eaters.
yeah,
They're not
yeah.
they're not contributing anything to Canadian society.
They
They're
already
only
paid.
taking.
They already pay taxes, huge amounts of taxes. Canadians are paying over 50% in taxes. They work all their lives, and now they need a little bit of help. And the government says, no, we will slaughter you, we'll kill you. But
And
look at the
who else?
language.
Are people who contribute very little to the Canadian economy, but take a lot because they're more vulnerable, and that's the mentally ill. So now they've thrown in the mentally ill into these batch of, quote unquote, useless eaters that need to be offed from society because they're just so useless. They don't contribute, and they're taking so much from Canada. And you know, they're probably not wrong. It is a cost saving mechanism, but at what cost?
Yeah, but if a society is normal, and of course, Canadian society is not normal, it has become a beast, a monster of a society. But in a normal society, we take care of those that cannot take care of themselves. I mean, the whole Bible, from the beginning to the end, I mean, there's so many verses after verses where God Himself is saying, take care of the poor, the orphans, and the widows, take care of those that have no voice, let there be justice for those that cannot fight and defend themselves. I mean, it's an ongoing, on and on and on in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, the whole church in Jerusalem, and then, of course, around the world later, every single day was feeding the poor. taking care of those that couldn't take care of themselves. But listen what the government is saying here. It's a government a document. Medical assistant in dying is a process that allows someone who is found eligible uh, uh, to be able to receive assisted assistance from a medical practitioner in ending their lives. I mean, it's unbelievable. A doctor that is supposed to be doing everything in his power to save lives is actually the one that slaughters and murders those that just feel under the weather. A method one, a physician or nurse, and that reminds me of the Nazi era and the Soviet era. A nurse practitioner directly administers a substance that causes death, an injection. Can you imagine? I mean, that's what we have seen the Nazis were doing. And we look at the Nazi era, we say, oh, bad people, bad people. And the Soviets were doing the same thing, bad people, bad people. But
and
I
and
think,
and that's a big one. What is usually something that even a secular person talks about the Nazi era, what they were doing, and says, "Oh, that was so bad." That was their killing of the disabled,
yeah,
right? They were what was one of the first things the Nazi did? They killed the disabled.
yeah.
It was before any of the other stuff. The disabled, you could correct me on this, but they were one of the first to go.
Yes, I mean, they were one of the first to go. First, in early 30s, in 1933, 34, 35, the first people that were actually eliminated and slaughtered were the political dissidents. They were the
Yeah,
people that
the
dared to
German people.
oppose in Germany the Nazi, yeah, the Germans, the good Germans that saw what was going on, and they said, no, we do not agree with this for a number of reasons. And they were the first ones to end up in the concentration camps. But of course, the concentration camps was the first step. Later on, the systematic murder was introduced. But method two, a physician or nurse practitioner provides a prescribed a drug that the eligible person takes themselves in order to bring about their own death. I mean, this is absolutely shocking to me that you've got doctors that go through many years of schooling and being taught how to save. I mean, every doctor, just like the lawyers, you got to learn about pretty much everything in general, and then you got your, specification, what you want to do. The doctors go through the same ordeal. First, they go into a general thing. They go through human body and psychology and all those different things, and then they will have their specialization. However, they know that people go through the depressions because they study about this. They know that a human psyche can go through various difficulties, and they know how and what to do to apply to help a person that is under the gun, if you will, of their circumstances. But the Canadian government is not choosing that. They are not telling really the doctors to take that road. Instead, they're telling the doctors, it will be better to eliminate that human being, because a person that is depressed, a person that is hurting, the person that is not contributing, elderly, disabled, that is not paying taxes anymore, it's a drain on the society. And it would be better for us to save money to murder that individual. That's why this whole thing, Nathaniel, is so sinister, so wicked, so evil. That's why, and I understand that some Canadians are looking at this and hearing this like, no, you're crazy. How can you call us beasts and murderers and monsters? Well, listen, our society has become so evil that when we see those things, we just move on. It's like nothing to see here. It's not the big deal. That's why I love history, because when we look at the Nazi era, when we look at the Soviets and we say that was evil, pretty much everyone, unless you're a psychopath or completely brainless or brainwashed, you will agree that what the Nazis did was evil.
And to that point, I believe it's called the uh, Action T4 program that began with euthanasia in Nazi Germany, began with euthanasia of the disabled under the language of mercy killing. And the state redefined human worth as based on productivity and, of course, racial ideology. But productivity was one of the criteria. And what do we see today? We see that if you're not productive, you're not contributing anything. I mean, this is a cost saving program. How great for Canadian society that we can just get rid of these people and it's going to save us tax dollars. That's this is a
It was
concern.
a campaign. It was called a campaign of mass murder by involuntary euthanasia. We targeted people with disabilities and the mentally ill in Nazi Germany. Nathaniel, this is happening already in Canada. Of course, it's not formalized yet, it's not open, but it's happening with the homeless people. We hear stories after stories after stories of homeless people that are, half of them are mentally challenged, that are being systematically slaughtered by the government because the government can literally get away with this. But look, the killing, the murdering took place from September 1939 until the end of World War II in Europe. Between 275,000 and 300,000 people were slaughtered in psychiatric hospitals in Germany, Austria, occupied Poland, and places as well. So the government was using this program to destroy human life that the regime considered unworthy to live. And of course, if you know your history, you know that the Germans believe that they are the special race, that they are hired up, and the rest are, they called us all kinds of different names. But in a way, we were a commodity. Just like the Canadian government is treating Canadians, we're just a social insurance number, we're a commodity to them. And yeah, commodity is valuable. So slaves are valuable to a point, but you can do whatever you want with your slaves, right? The state owns you. And if the state says, I don't like Artur Pawlowski, he is too loud, he is exposing too much of our dirt, well, let's assist him in, you know, departing from this side of eternity. And that reminds me of this saying. There is a famous saying in Poland and around the world right now is catching up, that you will they will suicide you. And there is this big thing that is going on, that when a government comes after you and arrests you, and if you have a vital information against them to expose the evil of the government, let's say, or any entity, then you will commit suicide. They will suicide you. That means what happened to Epstein, if that in fact happened to him, I mean, I don't know, God knows it all, but if that happened to him, of course he was murdered. If he in fact died, he was murdered by the state. And the cameras were not working and the guards fall asleep. Listen, I spent time in prison. This thing doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. It's impossible to happen.
Certainly not with such a high
No,
profile.
but one thing can happen, Nathaniel. One thing. Let's say cameras. Okay, I'm fine with that. I can live with that. But then the guards will be extra vigilant. If there is a malfunction of anything,
Yeah.
then the guards are really upping their game. There's more guards. There's fixing of the problem. There are witnesses because something is not working properly. So the humans step in. But here, all of it. I mean, come on. We all know that he was suicided. And in Poland, it happened. High profile people were suicide. They were murdered by the state because they came publicly and they said they're going to tell the public what's really going on. So when you're dealing with a monster of a society like this, everything goes. I mean, there's no limits, there's no checks and balances, there's no accountability. The government, which is in bed with a culture of death, can do whatever they want. And that's exactly what the Nazi Germany was doing. They were doing whatever they wanted. And there was really nothing you could do about it because they had the guns, they had the handcuffs, they got the prisons, they got the crooked judges, they had the bloody murders, doctors and nurses, and you found yourself in prison or in a concentration camp, and that was it. That was it. Nothing could be done because Germany entered this phase of a total culture of death where
And that's
human life was worth absolutely nothing. Oh, let me take this back. Your life was not worth absolutely nothing because the leaders, the carnies of that time, the Trudeaus of that time, the Bidens of that time, the Clintons, the Obamas, the Smiths, the Kennys of that time, or the Fords in Ontario, those types of people valued their lives above your life. So, in other words, we do this to you, but of course, no one can do this to us because we are the chosen people. We are the globalists. We are the elites. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, and that's certainly a concern for people that are outspoken against the government, because they could, just like the communists or the Nazis, they placed people into the psych wards or the hospitals, and then mysteriously that person went mentally insane or killed themselves. Like that is certainly a concern for people that are outspoken against the government. What would happen? I mean, will the next step be that this program is actually forced on people? I mean, what if there's a person and the doctor says, well, there's nothing I can do, we got to unplug them from the machine?
They're
And
already doing it.
right, so it can be forced. Like, there's so many concerns. And
Did you hear about the lady, Natanya? Did you hear about this famous story? Actually, it went around the world. It was viral. That she changed her mind.
yeah.
She first said, I'm done. I got enough. And then she said, I've changed my mind. Do not do this to me. And they did it anyway. They actually murdered that woman against her will because she had a moment of depression. She had a moment of, okay, I'm throwing a towel. But then she realized what she has done and she changed her mind. She was slaughtered. She was murdered anyway against her will. Look at this article here. People say, well, you're taking this absolutely too far. This is insanity. But look at this article, again, from the history books, children's euthanasia in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
Children with disabilities were murdered during the Nazi era. They did, that was a norm because it's progression. You start murdering those people, then you start murdering everybody else, and they were slaughtered. They were murdered by the nurses, by the doctors and the nurses,
And
and then
I mentioned empires and different civilizations that did similar practices, and one of them was ancient Rome and ancient Sparta. They would leave their undesired infants to freeze or starve and just die out in the elements. They would leave them out. And actually, Christians were one of the first people who would go out when the Romans were doing this, and they would save these babies. So in the culture of euthanasia, undesirables, the Christians came in and would actually be for life. The early Christians, the early church was doing this. And of course history repeats itself. So we see this with Nazi Germany as well. And my concern, one of my biggest concerns, is what this does to a society when little children, babies in the womb, and children in general are not valued. They're devalued. They're placed below an adult human being when it comes to value of human life. And then the elderly are placed below an adult human being in value. Like at this point, does any human being have value, or is it just the middle-aged, corporate boss? Is
no,
that
not according to them.
value?
Not according to them. According to them, again, you're a commodity, and sometimes you can get rid of the commodity, even a valuable one, for a bigger ideology. Look what it says here: the value of children and the Nazi ideology. In August 1941, Hitler formally stopped the gassings in the adult euthanasia programs after a public outcry. So even during that time, there were some people that were leading the charge and said this is evil, but it was replaced. Listen to this. In it was replaced, it was done by individual lethal overdose. Hey, we started this program by telling you that that's exactly how they're doing. They are injecting lethal something into human body to end that life, to murder that people. The Nazis did it, just a few years ago, and we call them monsters. And we have become the very thing we have been criticizing for decades. I mean, this is absolute sickness that that our culture embraced. We
Yeah,
have become a
I think we've become worse because the Nazis would be a little bit put to shame as to the scale that we do all of this today. I mean, the Nazis would dream of the tens of millions of babies that have been aborted, the 100,000 of people who were just euthanized in Canada since this program came into effect. How many thousands just this year? A 26-year-old was just euthanized in Canada. The Nazis didn't even do things this cruel. Like I'm very concerned what this does to the psyche of a civilization, of a society. I mean, are we Canadians going to be complete sociopaths? Are we going to be complete psychopaths, just numb to every kind of death? I mean, that is what Pope John Paul II meant by a culture of death. We have normalized death in a society.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Look at the article. I mean, you're talking about being 25 and the doctor will not be able to do it. No, no, no. This train left the station a long time ago. They are after children. Doctors in Canada propose euthanasia for babies with disabilities.
And
So,
they did it tragically in Iceland, and to them, in their eyes, that was very effective, where all those poor babies never got to be born or
and then
were euthanized.
they should never be called doctors. They're bloody mangalas. They're murderers. They're beasts. They're monsters. Doctors in Canada have said euthanasia for newborn babies who are born with disabilities may be an appropriate treatment. Well, how about you get that treatment, you psychopath? You eliminate yourself because obviously you're sick in the head and you should be eliminated by your own standard. I mean, this is makes it makes me really
I mean,
mad.
this is eugenics, and generally, when you tell people about eugenics, they're, oh, that sounds so horrible. But our society is doing it right now, and you don't really seem to be speaking out against it in any way, shape, or form. And it's actively happening right now. We are killing the undesirables, and this is not new. This is not new. There's a very famous case in the United States. It's called Buck v. Bell. It is a, I believe, a stain on America because that's a Supreme Court decision where the Supreme Court actually fascinating. The judge that wrote the opinion is a secular humanist. His opinion was, yeah, he was a bit of a philosopher. He called himself, and he would say that we need to eliminate God from the law entirely. We need to. His view was we needed to separate law and morality completely. So he wrote the Supreme Court decision in 1920s, I want to say. I don't remember the exact date, but he essentially said that so Virginia passed a statute where they were going to sterilize people who were deemed imbeciles. So if you had like a very low IQ, you would actually be forcibly sterilized. So you can no longer have children. And this Supreme Court judge who said we need to get rid of God, we need to separate morality and the law because morality has no business in law. You know what his opinion was? Yeah, 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. This statute sounds very constitutional. Let's sterilize this poor woman. She was sterilized. Her tubes were tied, and she could no longer have any more babies because she was deemed an imbecile, and it was forced. It was forced against her will, and this is a stain, and it's tragic. It's horrible, but I'm glad that we can look back on that case and we can talk about it. This is what happens when you separate law and morality. This is what happens when you remove God from a society. You have complete depraved minds complete depraved judges who are writing these opinions, who are presiding over you, telling you what's the law is, what's right and what's wrong, and they mess things up. I mean, in America, slavery, the Supreme Court said, yeah, slavery is good to go. This is what happens when you remove God from the law. And this is what we've done in Canada. We have completely kicked God out. The Canadian Supreme Court hates God. I don't think there's a more liberal Supreme Court on the face of the planet. They're disgusting, absolutely
Yes,
disgusting
they're monsters. They're
in
wicked.
what they do. This is what happens. This is what happens when the prevailing theory in law right now is law and economics, which means that if it's economically beneficial, that's what the law should be. But that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense because slavery was economically beneficial, and that's still wrong. You look back in
And
that,
war is
yeah,
economically beneficial as well. But look what the Canadians are saying. Canada has jumped so enthusiastically into the euthanasia abyss that I have little doubt that infanticide
yeah,
infanticide will eventually be allowed there. It's only logical. If
yeah,
killing is an acceptable answer to suffering, why limit the killing to adults? And the proposal came already to expand this for murder of the children
yeah,
in 21. The Canadian Parliament, re, what it says here, repealed the requirement that the natural death of those applying for assisted suicide be reasonable, foreseeable. And
yeah.
2024 was legislation was introduced so that euthanasia and assisted suicide would be legal on the grounds of mental health alone in March 2027. So those politicians, they are absolutely lost their marbles. And
Yeah, I mean, from their logic, from their perspective, I mean, I guess it does make sense because why are you drawing these imaginary lines? You know, 15 weeks or 5 weeks or infant. I mean, by their standard, yeah, why would you draw that line? Unless there's something inside of you that's telling you, yeah, after a certain point, it's definitely wrong. But that means I guess there's hope for that person because at least something's tugging at their heart telling them, hey, at some point this is wrong. Unfortunately, they miss the point because they're still murdering and they don't understand that it's wrong at any stage. Once there's a human being, once there's a separate DNA sequence, once that person is growing up until death, that person has value and dignity and should not be completely murdered. And otherwise, why are we better than the Nazis? What makes us better? Why did we win the war and turn into the very people that we were fighting against?
yeah, during the Nazi era, the Germans decided to destroy because they considered themselves the master race, and they considered the unfit or handicapped people to kind of be, becoming a blemish on their master race theory. So they you call them useless, of course, and in the name of purity, they started to eliminate those that, in their views, were unfit to be alive. History is teaching us that when you lose any moral standards, when you lose any boundaries, if you will, if there is no standard, everything goes, always ends with millions of people, tens of millions of people dying. And I don't think Canadians are realizing, because this the same thing, of course, is in Australia, New Zealand, all the so-called West countries are following the same pattern. They do not understand, Nathaniel, that this is their undoing. They are effectively are destroying themselves. They don't see it yet. They don't realize that yet. But this is the end. This is the beginning, if you will, of of their own end. Of course, they don't understand that, but they will when it's there, when it's their turn to face the the music. You talked about Action T4. euthanasia program. Again, we're talking about the Nazi Germany. The goal of the Nazi euthanasia program was to kill people with mental and physical disabilities. And under that category, everyone else could fall in. I mean, you're mentally ill because you're opposing Adolf Hitler. You're mentally ill because you stand against the Nazi empire. You're mentally ill because you're exposing the Trudeau's Carney's government. You're mentally ill because you're talking about the liberals, NDP, and conservatives being one. So anything goes because, again, it's a culture of death. And
Yeah, and remember that the authors of the final solution were who? It was the most educated people in the entire world. They were the professors, the doctors, the lawyers, the judges. It was
yeah,
a group of people who were all university educated, very well read, respectable people. And their solution was, yeah, we need to eradicate all these people. So we live in a society that has also, fallaciously placed all these people up, that, oh, we need to listen to the experts, we need to listen to the people with the white coat on. But why very often these supposed smart people are actually leading you completely astray. They have ulterior motives. And we
yes,
saw this in Nazi Germany time and again. We've seen this in history, that the smart people, the people in society that have authority, that are the experts, quote unquote, actually have ulterior motives or are just completely wrong. They're just flawed about all their ideas. What they call science is actually not scientific at all, right? It's so interesting. Us Christians stand on science more than the secular people that believe in science as a religion. Because I believe in science in the way that I believe in it, in the sense that, hey, science teaches that life begins at the moment of conception, because that is when a human life just begins, right? It begins to grow. It's a new DNA sequence. It's its own separate human. That's what science shows us, of course, biblically. But I'm just saying, scientifically, that's what it says. But the people that claim to believe in science say, no, 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 that's not when life begins. So they reject science that they basically have a religion stake in. It's fascinating, because as Christians, we stand on its way. But you said you care about science. Why aren't you
yeah,
listening to
yeah.
actual science? I don't
No,
understand.
they don't, because it only works one way, Nathaniel. My body, my choice. Remember, they were screaming at us. And then, of course, when the injections came and the lockdowns and the craziness, uh, it was my body, but their choice. But do you want to read what it says here? Those suffering from the
Yeah,
categories of patients
yeah.
were,
It's those
read that.
suffering from schizophrenia, epilepsy, dementia, and encephalitis, and other
And
chronic psychiatric or neurological disorders. Those of not German blood, those
related blood, right?
criminally insane, or those committed on criminal grounds, those who had been confined to the institution in question for more than 5 years. So basically, anyone with mental disabilities that they claim is a mental disability, anyone who's
But
not
not only that,
German, and anyone who's a criminal.
yeah, anyone that according to them is a criminal. Criminal. Remember that according to them, if you oppose the Nazi regime, you were a criminal. Polish people fighting for the liberation of our nation were called bandits and criminals. So we were, within that category. If you were not related, within the German blood, you qualified, So it expands and never stops. Criminally insane or those committed on criminal grounds. So again, anyone that, Derek Reimer, he opposed the pedophilia in Calgary. He was criminally convicted. He fits in. I mean, perfectly. I was I was convicted of terrorism for a sermon to a peaceful assembly of
Well, if
truckers and
they if
farmers.
they if they expand this program, then eventually people like you might be suicided, as you said earlier. I mean, it's very possible. And these
Because it
are
never
these
stopped.
are they don't stop, and this is the direct consequences that I believe this is going towards. And of course, a a, a more in your face, that that's less in your face, if that makes sense. Consequence is what it's done to the heart of our society, because
Yeah.
we've completely removed God. We hate human beings. We hate the elderly. We hate the young people. We kill them off. And what is it that exactly we value? I don't know. What virtues do we have as Canadians anymore? Hockey? Tim
Yeah.
Hortons? By the
That's
way,
it.
Tim Hortons is an American company now, so we don't even have that anymore. Well, like, what is it that makes a Canadian a Canadian? What do we value again? Democracy? Like, but there's so many countries that have democracy. What makes us Canadian? What is it that we have like virtues in? Do we care about anything? Do we value anything? Do we have any sort of moral backbone at all? Like anything that we can appeal to? No, not
Not,
nothing.
not
We got
anymore.
hockey.
Not anymore. But here is the thing. You talked about science, trusting the experts, and we were bombarded. The propaganda was doing its best to bombard us with those slogans: trust the science, trust the experts, safe and effective, all those different things. The Nazis did the same thing. I mean, it's straight from their book, How to Become a Tyrant. Secretly recruited medical experts. Again, medical experts. You understand the language. I always say to the people when I teach, pay attention to the language because it's copy paste. It's identical. It's the same play. It's from the same playbook. Medical experts, physicians, many of them of significant reputation, right? They write all kinds of things in journals, medical journals. They're the experts. They are the highly established medical experts and so on. Those were the very people that they hired to exterminate human life. And what we are witnessing right now is again a repetition of history and how we got here. And I agree with you 100%. We got here because we removed checks and balances and accountability. If there is no God, you're nothing but an animal.
Yeah, we
And
if there's no God, there's no law. So I actually read a book, and the premise, it was a Columbia professor of law that published the book, which is very surprising. But essentially, he said that without God, I don't even know if he's a Christian, but he said without God, without the Christian perspective, the Christian worldview, the Bible, law makes no sense because you
yeah,
have nothing to appeal to. It's all just arbitrary rules. If God doesn't exist, you have no right to look back into history and say, yeah, slavery was wrong, but it was legal.
yeah.
If your God is democracy or humanism or evolution or science, why is slavery wrong? You have nothing to appeal to. The law can never be wrong because it's just the law. It just is. It's not.
And why
You can't be
why
wrong.
we call genocide genocide? Why
Yeah,
the left is screaming and yelling at Donald Trump and his military forces engaging in Iran? I
yeah.
mean, you have nothing to stand on.
Nothing. It's
What
a,
are your moral
everything. Like
standards?
it's if it's legal. Let's say the society right now says is legal. What the Nazis did was 100% legal. That was a democratic process, actually. So you can't say it's wrong. See, I as a Christian, I can look at something and I can say that's wrong. Why? Because it contradicts the word of God. It
Yeah.
contradicts the laws of nature that are written on our hearts. I can say that. If you're not a Christian, you have no right to say that. You have no
But
if
why
you're an atheist, you have nothing to appeal to. You have nothing to say that's wrong because that's just your opinion. And you
yeah,
can't if the law.
why war in Ukraine is so wrong?
Yeah,
I
why?
mean, I don't understand. From their point of view, it's perfectly fine. A bigger animal takes the prey.
Yeah.
Russia takes Ukraine. That's perfectly
Even these
fine according to the survival of the fittest.
yeah.
The stronger takes the weaker. I mean, nothing to see here. It's perfectly fine. So why the outrage? Why the screaming and yelling? What is happening in Iran or in Gaza?
In these podcasts that you and I do, we appeal to God. We appeal to the Bible, what the Bible says. Why? Because that's our ultimate authority, that's our ultimate foundation. That is everything. That is the base of everything. So I'm going to steal this example from something a professor said. He says, you know, scientifically, can you prove that smoking is bad for you? So, for example, science says, it's funny actually. Doctors will say, don't smoke, and people that are atheists, right? They say you can't rely on faith. You can everything has to be based in reality and science. Okay, well, why is smoking bad for you? Well, because the doctors say it's bad for you. Okay, but what does the science actually say? Well, the science says that it'll develop black tar on your lungs, and that's bad for you. Oh, okay, okay, and then the doctors will say, that causes you to die younger. Okay, but why is that bad? Science can't tell you why dying younger is bad. That's not a scientific claim. That's a faith claim. That is not based on science. Why is dying young bad? Can you tell that? Can you prove that scientifically that it's bad? No, you can't. Everything is based on faith. It's nonsensical to say we remove faith and assumptions from everything. It's just science. Yeah, but science can't prove so many things. You need, like, for example, when does life begin? That can be proven by science, but it can also be proven by faith, by what God says. Because science, apparently, according to them, science can't prove when life begins, because they place the value of personhood later on. Yeah, life begins at conception, technically, scientifically, but then the value of human life comes later. Why? You just made that up. I mean,
Yeah.
my
And
point is
again,
to
we
say,
talked about the egg of
yeah, an eagle.
eagle,
Yeah,
right? Why that egg is more valuable than a human life.
yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. They don't make any sense. And again, we're going back to the devil. He doesn't make any sense. The devil is a very interesting creature because he knows the truth, and that's the thing. He have seen the truth in action. He knows it. He knows the word of God. He has been there where it was written, and yet he has chosen to pervert everything and everyone on purpose. Today I was listening, I was actually angry because I listened to a person that was explaining what's happening in Canada, and he says the politicians are incompetent. They're not doing this on purpose. And I wanted to yell and scream, no, that's not true. They are doing this on purpose. They exactly know what they're doing. The destruction of economy in Canada is done on purpose. The multiculturalism, the destabilization of our society, it's done on purpose. The lost tens of thousands, of hundreds of thousands of people that were waiting for a deportation and no one knows where they are. It's done on purpose. I mean, come on. The CRA can chase you for $5 of taxes and they don't know where tens of thousands of people are. Of course, if they wanted to, they could find them.
So
The
at some point, it's not incompetence, and this is a really interesting topic that I think you would be able to do an entire podcast on, and that's how civilizations begin to crumble, how they start to snowball, and you've seen that. You've seen. I mean, how many times has Poland been under a type of regime that had a little empire, and then they snowballed and fell and collapsed?
Yeah,
And
every empire ends the same way. Poland was an empire. I know that's hard to believe right now, but Poland was an empire. Actually, it was an empire that stopped the Roman invasion, Viking invasion, Ottoman Empire, Mongolians, Genghis Khan was stopped by the Polish Empire. What happened? Well, they became comfortable, they became morally deprived, they became selfish, self focused, and just evil as a society. I mean, they have become, the drunkards and self focused, my best life now type of individuals. And in the West, we see the same pattern, the same thing. We are in a big decline. But again, I want to end with a hopeful tone. But I have one little thing, and it's in Polish language, but I think it's very interesting. I'll just translate it to you because now the whole world is talking about it, and I came across to a write up, with my own from my own people, in Polish language. It says death the same day,
yeah, death in the same day.
dead in the same day. And this is a write up about how Canada is progressing from, well, you need a certain timeline in order to, approve the assisted dying, the MAID. But now that was changed. The article states that it can be done pretty much the same day.
The Catholics,
You
the Catholics are rebuking us.
Yeah, the Catholic, this is the Vatican News. The Catholics are saying this is insanity. What is happening? It's crazy, because again, like this woman that was murdered by the Canadian government, government entity. Uh, she changed her mind, because sometimes you're overwhelmed. We're we're very fragile people. I know we like to think of ourselves like we're those strong, we can take everything, every giant, every circumstance. But the reality is that we're very fragile. One thing, look what is happening right now. We had those discussions a lot. We even did a podcast about the gossip, the slander, the attacks, because people feelings are hurt and they snap and they break and they go into this killing spree or character assassination spree, because we're fragile. We can break very quickly, actually, and I've seen people breaking very quickly. So today you may feel like, I can't take this anymore. This is overwhelming. It's too much. I see no light in the
I mean,
tunnel. I
even
see.
Elijah, what did Elijah tell God?
Yeah,
Just kill me now, end me. And then he's
yeah,
like, hey, calm down, eat some food, take a nap. You'll be
right.
okay in the
And
morning.
that woman did calm down. That woman realized, okay, maybe I made a major mistake and I want to change that. I have a right to change that because it's my decision. And the government murdered that woman. Says, no, you cannot change your decision. It's quite fascinating. I don't want to talk about politics, but it's very fascinating that those politicians are flip flopping all the time. Depends of the wind. They change their minds all the time. But here is a woman that was not allowed by the government to change her mind, and she was slaughtered like a piece, like a cockroach, like someone that has no value. So we as a society, we as a church, we're guilty. We've allowed this evil to creep in. We've done nothing to tackle this evil, and to this day the church is such a big division. Everyone is doing their own little thing, like the book of Judges, what's right in our own eyes, that we're being literally eaten by monsters. We're being destroyed by the uncircumcised Philistines, just because they can. And until we rise up as humans, and even if you're not a believer, we must rise up as human beings, realizing that this is evil. It's a great evil. It's the biggest evil that we have seen in our society, this culture of death, and it must be stopped. The politicians that we have today are not willing to stop it. They're part of the problem. So we have to start electing different people that can reverse this. And in the United States, we see this when the president of the United States of America comes and says, yeah, babies have right to live. I mean, he believes that the babies should be allowed to live. I mean, duh, what a revelation, right?
Vice
What
President of the
30,
United States, arguably, the second most powerful man on the planet, was at the March for Life here in Washington, D.C.
yeah, yeah, because the Americans, in big part, realized, okay, we made a major mistake. We went too far and we're crumbling. This empire is coming down. Canadians, so when Americans are pushing to the right, Canadians are pushing very hard to the left without realizing that they're undoing themselves, that they are cursing themselves and the future of their own existence and existence of their children. So we at the church, we have the power. We got to pray against this. We got to stand against this, and we have to become vocal. Look, even during the Nazi era, Nathaniel, this is crazy. Even during the Nazi era, the bishops, the Catholic clergy stood up against Hitler, and they said this is wrong. And the Hitler changed his tactics. I mean, he didn't stop totally, but at least it was halted to a degree. In other words, every time we can halt evil, potentially we're saving lives, right? I get those reports from United States every time our friends, and I was part with them. I did this outside of the, you know, um, Holocaust for the babies, the Planned Parenthood craziness, and other places. And they sent me the reports that they saved another baby. They stopped the genocide from happening. And if it's one human being, they have accomplished what they what God sent them to do. So we, the church, we must rise up and we have to unite against this great evil and push it and talk about it, explain to people why this is evil and where is this heading. Because we just present it to you to the best of our ability that the progression never stops. It must be stopped. And quite often, when I say to the people, evil never stops on its own, evil must be stopped. Who's going to stop it?
Yeah.
Good people must rise up against the evil people, and the good people must stop the evil people. That's how it's done. That's how it always has been done.
Yeah. And
When the people saw Hitler and the Nazi Party, some, including Canadians, which is hard to understand right now, hard to believe that there were hundreds of thousands of volunteers from Canada that actually went to liberate Europe, Americans, hundreds of thousands, and others, Australians. I just watched a movie, which was incredible movie about Australian soldiers fighting communists in Vietnam and how brave there are. Those kids volunteered to liberate Vietnam, and it was a really amazing movie. So what happened to us? I mean, it's a simple question. What happened to us humans that we justify and we think that slaughter of the babies is fine, eliminating disabled people, vulnerable, elderly, those that cannot defend themselves, those that are under the gun of depression, or I watched this. I probably will post this. There is this um, interview that one of the propaganda media did. So even they are realizing that this is just crazy. And there is this man that just lost his house and has no place to live. And he says, I've lost all hope. I have no place. I don't want to end up on the streets or homeless. So I prefer to die. And the doctors are fine with that. And the government is okay with that. Oh, yeah, economical circumstances, you're losing your property, you will probably end up homeless and you want to die. That's good. That's fine for by us. It's all perfectly justifiable that you should end your life because you're poor. This is insanity. This is evil.
yeah.
This is evil.
Yeah. And MAID is on track to become the leading cause of death in Canada, one of the leading causes of death in Canada, but it ought not be so. And I just have a question to pose to the people listening. If slavery was still legal in the place that you live, whether that's United States or Canada, let's say slavery was legal today, what would you be doing to counteract that, to fight against that, to push back against that? Would you push back against that? Because I bet most people watching will be like, yeah, of course I would push back against. Of course I wouldn't be supporting that. But there was a time when the church was silent towards that. And then it took real Christians, the real church, to actually spearhead the movement that abolished slavery. And today we have the exact same situation. You have abortion, you have medical assistance in dying, you have other things that are just wrong. They are evil, they are wrong, and they are prevalent in your society. So, what are you doing? Are you at a church, for example, that supports the modern day slavery? Are you at a church that supports abortion? Are you at a church that supports MAID? Are you at a church that's pushing back against that at all? Because let's say it was the 1800s and I lived in the South and I was at a church that was actually promoting slavery or even silent on the topic of slavery. That would sear my conscience to continue being at a church like that. So I have a question to everyone who's watching. What are you doing to push back against this? Are you speaking about this? Are you challenging your leaders in the church? Are you challenging other believers? Are you doing anything? Are you speaking about it at all? Or are we just going to stick our heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening? But it is happening. And hundreds of thousands, now in the millions, are dying as a result of all these government programs and euthanasia projects, whether it's abortion or MAID or anything else. So we need to speak up, push back against this, and I'll finish with John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And that's what we stand on. We stand on life. We stand on biblical principles. We stand on the moral law. that God has given us in his word, and that's written on our hearts and our conscience, and we have to stand on that and continue the fight.
Yeah. Into and I know you need to go back to school. If you want to support us, please do, especially now when we're still in courts and fighting. Go to streetchurch.ca, streetchurch.ca, and support us. And also share those videos because we are so crazy shadow banned in Canada. I mean, it's incredible to watch. I watched my life and it had thousands of views, and then I refreshed it and it was few hundreds. So they're messing with our algorithms. They're messing with our statistics. They are suppressing our videos. They don't want the people to hear and see what is really happening in China, behind the Iron Curtain right now in this country. So please share it and support us. Support us. We're heading into discovery. And of course, as you know, it's unbelievably expensive. And again, one man cannot do this, one family, one little church cannot do this, but together we will be unstoppable, unmovable. And again, in the end, with God, we have already won. The enemy just doesn't know it yet. So be blessed, stay strong, keep plowing, keep putting seed into the ground, and we shall see a great harvest. Be blessed.